Hey, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope,
Living Faith.
Welcome back to Growing Hope, Living Faith. We are excited to have a conversation today, and we're so thankful that you guys are listening in. Now, This is Season 3, Episode 4, so we are moving right along. Is that right?
That is correct.
Did I say that right?
You did. That is correct.
Yeah, so we've actually had a crazy week in our, probably the last 2 weeks in our neck of the woods. I'm recording this from Hiawassee, Georgia, and we had about 6 inches of snow, which in the South, we are still in the South, we are in the mountains, but we don't get a lot of snow here. So for us to get 6 inches, we have been having so much fun.
That's awesome. And your family came up, was able to enjoy it with your family, which makes it even better, when the family can come up and enjoy it with, sons and daughter-in-laws and kids. It makes it all much more better. And your dogs and crazy. I've seen the funny pictures of your dogs you've been putting out there. It's been awesome.
So my dogs would chase us every time we would ride down the sled. We had those little saucer sleds, but we would start at the hill and go down, and they would chase us all the way down. Those dogs ran so hard, but it was a lot of fun. But the bad part was I had to cancel church for the last 2 weeks.
It's hard.
And it just breaks my heart because, I did get to see some of our folks on Wednesday night, and I've just grown to love these people in Blairsville so much. They are so good. They're good-hearted, just good-hearted people. They love Jesus and they love each other. And I don't know, I was just having a conversation with Seth earlier, and I was just talking about how it's just interesting that I feel like I have no guards up around these people at this church. I feel like my heart's just so open to them, and I hope they love me like I love them.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's just so good to see grace just showing up in the lives of our people. And I just know God has good things in store for us. I don't know what that looks like, but awesome. I know He wants to take us to a new level in Him and to draw us close. And so I'm excited.
So good.
So you had a good day today too.
Yeah. Well, we've had an interesting weekend. So my brother called, and we've been talking about it for a little bit, but it's like, hey, you need to come down. I have my daughter Emery. She enjoys gymnastics and all that, and so they live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama now. And we were raised to be Alabama fans, so don't hold that against me. If you're not an Alabama fan, don't hold it against me. But my dad raised us all to be Alabama fans. But now my brother lives in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and so invited us to come down. He said, hey, the gymnastics team's awesome. I hear their meets are awesome, so come on down. And we'd love to have you guys come down and just go over to a meet and all that. So I'm like, all right. So he set it up. He got tickets from somebody he works with, and we set it all up. And it was Friday night. Was essentially the meet was on Friday night there in Tuscaloosa. So the kids, Morgan got off of school. I was off of work, and we jumped in the car and we headed towards Tuscaloosa. And the meet started at 6:30 Central Time. And so, we went and we hit a little bit of traffic in Trenton, Georgia, kind of on our way out, trying to get to the interstate. And then we got to Birmingham. We hit a lot of traffic in Birmingham. And so I'm sitting there in traffic, and I'm just kind of watching the time, click up that, we're supposed to be there at 6:30, and our arrival time is just going up and up and up. And finally it gets up to 6:33, 6:34. We're just going to be getting, to my brother's house, or where we're meeting my brother at. And so we finally get through traffic. And we have a car, Kia Sorento. It's been a great car, an amazing car, but it's got 298,000 miles on it. And so I was pushing the car probably a little bit hard. We get about 2 minutes away from my brother, and the engine starts knocking. And so we, unfortunately, the engine on our car, we're pretty sure is done. We don't really want to put a lot of money into it, so we're going to be looking for a new car and in that process. But it'll be good. We're excited, and we're just praying that we get a good car. That's always the hope. So that happened, but we went to the meet. We weren't mad or upset or anything at all, because that car owed us nothing more. I mean, it was a great car for us. Went to the meet, and then we came back yesterday. Thankfully, my brother has an extra car that they weren't using, so we were able to drive that car back and made it back well. And we missed out on the snow here, because I think we got maybe an inch of snow here, but the wind was blowing really, really bad. And then we didn't have church today, and just like you, we didn't have church, but I was able to go flying this afternoon, which, flying it's just such a beautiful, beautiful thing that I love to do. And so we went and we flew from Chattanooga. We did a loop around Chattanooga, and then we were able to fly north and, kind of northwest a little bit. Went up to Mont Eagle to see if we could see any snow, and there really wasn't any snow up there. I was surprised.
You should have come this way.
I know, we should have headed east. We kind of head northwest. Was able to go there. Flew over Sewanee University, which is in Mont Eagle. Was kind of very beautiful up there. Then kind of flew back to Chattanooga. Got to scare my son. So one of the things that I sometimes will do in an airplane is I was slowly just climbing, and we got up to about 8,000 feet. And then what I like to do is I'll pull the power and I'll nose it over, and literally you have this weightless feeling. It's like your body lifts off. And my son was in the back on the phone, and he looked up and he was like, "Wait, what's going on? What's going on?" And he thought something was going on with the airplane. But we had some weightless moments. I'll kind of dip over and then we'll straighten out, and then I dip over again. But so we did that, and it was a lot of fun. And my dad went. He likes to go flying with us as well. And so yeah, it was a great time. And so wow. It's always it's just so fascinating, to be up in the air and you're like looking down on all of these just houses and people. And it's really just kind of a cool opportunity to remember, the goodness of God, how small the world really is. Because when you're kind of up at a different perspective, the world really does become smaller. We are in Mont Eagle, Tennessee, and we can see the base of Lookout Mountain from Mont Eagle, Tennessee. And so it's like, the world really is small. And so most people on the earth, they think that everything in their world is just so important. And so, it's just, and we stress and we stress and we stress about all these things that are going on in our life. And when you're up in the air and you're just kind of looking up, it's just this beautiful reality of the goodness of God. It's looking at his creation, it's looking at his beauty. And it's that remembrance is, the world's small, and the problems that I think that I have, the problems that I'm going through, they're really not that big. They may be hard. There may be some struggles, but there's a beauty to kind of see in bigger picture of expanding your view a little bit. And to me, that's the beauty of flying is getting to be able to do some of those type of things. And so, yeah, it was a good day though. It was a good day.
Well, it sounds good.
Yeah.
It sounds good. And you should have flown over here if you wanted to see snow.
I know, we should have.
Just beautiful over here.
It would have been
I thought
beautiful.
the same thing, just looking at the snow. It was just, the creation and just seeing it clumped in the leaves of the trees. And I'm scared of birds, but we've been having some beautiful birds in our trees, like red-headed woodpeckers and huge birds. And just, watching them and just remembering how God cares for all of them. And it's just been a really beautiful time. And that's a different kind of worship, than just being gathered in the sanctuary, just to get outside. We went for a walk in the woods yesterday, and just the quietness of it, and it was just beautiful. Awesome. And I'm thankful for that. But I did do a Facebook Live today, and that it makes me really nervous because I feel like I don't know where to look, and then I get distracted with my hair looks like it's sticking up and all those good things. And I had several people from church that joined live, and so it was cool. I was trying to interact with them and then keep my focus, but the passage this week, and again, we're going through the narrative lectionary, and we've been tracking through the book of John. We're tracing the life of Jesus, and we're heading towards Lent, and that will take us to the cross, and then eventually the ascension and Pentecost. So there's a calendar that we're following, but we've been in the book of John, and I've really enjoyed. I've known these stories, but just doing the study of preaching these consecutively just really kind of makes you appreciate the placement. We talked a few weeks ago about the cleansing of the temple, and did it happen twice, or was that at the beginning or the ending? But where this story comes in today, it's the woman at the well, but it just falls right after the story of Jesus and Nicodemus.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing, everybody. We don't want you to panic because it's a long passage.
Yeah.
It
42
starts
verses.
in John 4, 1 through 42. So we're going to spare you of reading because it is good. And I did read it today on my Facebook Live. But read that and read it in a translation that you're not used to.
Yeah.
But it's the story of the woman at the well. And it's interesting. We're not going to read it all. We're just going to kind of talk. I mean, I'm sure if you're listening to this, I'm sure you're familiar with the story. But it's just really interesting to me of all the contrast that you have with the story of Jesus and Nicodemus and the story of the woman at the well in Jesus. Because both of those stories is about a one-on-one conversation that someone had with Jesus. And there's just a lot of contrast there. And again, I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like to be one-on-one, nobody around, just talking to Jesus. But the first thing that we see is one of the big contrasts is, first of all, in the story of Jesus and Nicodemus in John 3, is he's named. He has a name. We know his name. I call him Nick. But the lady in chapter 4 has no name that we know of. We just call her the Samaritan woman at the well, or something along those lines. But she wasn't named. Another contrast is that Nicodemus and Jesus talked at night, and the woman and Jesus, it was broad, open daylight. Yeah. And then the status, you have Nicodemus. He was a Pharisee and he was a ruler of the Jews. So he knew his stuff, right?
Yeah,
he should. And then here we have a Samaritan woman. So you would say that the status, he was a high status person and she's a low status. She's unmarried, we find out. But, he was very high class. And then he was also an insider. He knew, he knew all the Jewish rules and all that. But she was an outsider. So, again, both of them kind of misunderstand Jesus at first. But, in the conversation with Jesus and Nicodemus, he's just kind of out there like, how does this happen, And it's like the woman could hang with them. Like she carried on this conversation, and we'll get to that in a minute, about worship. But Nicodemus kind of seemed to struggle a little bit with the theology of the conversation, where she didn't as much. But the biggest contrast, the biggest difference is both of their responses. So in the woman at the well, she gets so excited that she leaves her jar and she runs off and she tells the whole town about this Messiah.
Yeah.
And Nicodemus kind of quietly leaves, and I'm not dogging on Nick, but he doesn't profess or confess, however you want to say that. He doesn't declare anything in that encounter, and we think that later on at some point, he's arguing for Jesus, and then he's there at when Jesus died and helped bury him, but he kind of had an inward faith, where he wasn't very vocal, but she had to tell everybody in the whole wide world. So anyway, that's just kind of looking at it going into it. But
yeah, I like it. Yeah, so maybe the way that you can look at it is, Nicodemus came in his power, he came in his clout, but maybe he left with some shame almost, and kind of took that shame. She came to Jesus in shame, and then she left, and the shame was no longer that which drove her in her actions and the way that she went about. And so, like you said, it is two very different, contrasting things here. I'm not saying, once again, we don't know what happened with Nicodemus after he left, but there was almost this shame of like, he has received this gift, but there's this, I can't share this, because if I share this, then it may mess up my prestige, it may mess up my standing, it may mess up. And so it's much easier to keep it down, as opposed to, she came from a position of shame, and was able to leave that shame behind because
Good.
she didn't necessarily have all the prestige and all that kind of stuff. That's just kind of came to me as you were kind of talking through all of that as a whole. But
cool.
it's a beautiful, beautiful story. There's so much that you can just chew on and think about as far as, Jesus even going through Samaria, and good Jews would not go through Samaria. Judea was in the south, Galilee was in the north, and it was, there was the bread for the sandwich of Israel, but the Samaritans lived in the middle. And lots of times you would have to cross the Jordan. You would go up, north, and then you would cross back over the Jordan to get into Galilee if you were going from Judea, and the same thing. And so they just didn't want to be associated. They didn't want to talk to Samaritans. Like, so there's just so much culturally, socially that's going on here that, just take that time to dive a little bit deeper, because it pulls up so much.
Kings.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can look in First Kings and see about the division of the kingdoms, and Samaria was actually the capital of the northern kingdom. And so when there was war, and there's just a lot. I think the Assyrians took them over, and then they brought other people that Assyrians had captured, and it was kind of almost like a melting pot of people there, and they were marrying each other. So racially they were mixed. Yeah. And then also with their worship, they had mingled with other kinds of practices and other kinds of things. And so not only was it was a racial thing and a cultural thing, but also a spiritual thing. Yeah. And so, they despised each other. It was, the feeling was mutual. So for Jesus to say, hey, I'm going to go through there because I have to. Yeah. He didn't have to, as far as like, that's the only way. And that word Jesus had to go there. It means I love the word behooved. Yeah. That's what it means. He just felt compelled. He felt drawn. He felt like he just had to be there. And of course, we know that Jesus, there was this encounter, and it seemed like he went out of his way to go into to break through those barriers. Those are some very strong racial and cultural barriers that he broke through to be able to meet her. So she comes at the time of day when it's warm outside, and Jesus, the word became flesh, and now the flesh is tired, and he's sitting down by the well, and he's, just sitting there. She comes up, and it's noon. It's hot, probably. But it's interesting that she's there at that time of day. She didn't want to interact. She didn't want to see other people. And, but it was another thing. It was also just a daily chore that most of the time the women or the girls, would go down to the well and get their water for the day. And that was like a daily thing. And I can imagine carrying pots of water back and forth, every single day. But I mean, that was the thing. And she was purposely there at a different time of day than what would have been normal. And, as she has this conversation with Jesus, it's interesting. I can just see her walking up to this well and seeing this obvious Jewish man. I bet she acted like she didn't see him, or she turned her eyes, or, let's just get the water and get out of here. I'm probably not safe, And then he breaks the silence, and he's like, give me a drink, give me something to drink. And, he doesn't have anything with him. So what is he going to drink out of? Her cup? Yeah. I mean, is he going to drink out of her pot? And then they have this dialogue, and it's interesting, how it all, I mean, he just kind of meets her where she is, and they just dialogue, and she's confused, because right off the bat, he says, if you knew who was talking to you, you would be asking me for water, because I can give you this living water, And so they start having this theological conversation, and then it gets to the point where he tells her to go get her husband. Right. And at that point, I can just imagine the shock on her face, like, what am I going to do? I can just see her kind of coughing, like, I don't have one, just kind of mumbling it under her breath. But she says that she doesn't have one. So she's honest. That's cool that she's honest. And then Jesus says, well, you didn't lie to me, but, you're basically divorced. You've had several of these husbands, He didn't call them customers, but he said husbands. And the person that you're with now is not your husband. So immediately he read her story. He just read her book. And wow, I can't imagine the shock that went through her that he knew those things. And if it's okay for me to ramble,
Go for it.
And I mentioned this in my sermon today or my Facebook Live, little encouragement, but it's so easy when we see people that are vulnerable, it's so easy to just slap them with a label. And I think it's really important that we don't do this to this woman because we don't know her story. You know, all we know is that she's had all these husbands, but in that day and time, it was extremely hard for a woman to divorce. It's not like it is today. Like, you know, I don't like how you look anymore. I'm divorcing you. Or I don't like, you know, you don't bring enough money home. I mean, nowadays we can divorce. Either person can divorce for whatever reason. You can't stop it. But in that day and time, it was highly unlikely. So we don't know. Maybe she was a widow and was passed to her dead husband's brother. Or maybe there was something defective with, you know, because at that time you could divorce somebody if they didn't please you.
Right.
And so maybe she was rejected time after time. Or maybe she was just hard to live with. Maybe, you know, we don't know. And my caution is we have to be careful when we start labeling. We just automatically, I've heard so many messages or I've read so many things, you know, calling her a prostitute or, you know, these things where the scripture does not say that. But there is some level of shame there because she is there at a time of day that most people wouldn't be there. And I think it's safe to say her story is complicated. But isn't it good to know that Jesus meets us in our complicated stories, in our ordinary lives, in our mundane task? He will meet us right there and offer us living water and offer us something, you know, to live for. And I just love it that she didn't get angry when he you know, brought this to light. It was almost like a relief that, well, let's just get this out of the way, you know? And he loved her anyway, whether she was rejected or whether she was a deadbeat wife, whatever her story was, Jesus knew it. And he didn't shame her, but he offered her living water. And that just gives me so much encouragement to know that, that we can have a past, we can have a broken past, and we can have baggage. I mean, she's carrying this pot, but I tell you, the baggage that she carried was more than the pot. And she was so thrilled with his words. And after, you know, they had this dialogue and she realizes that he's the Messiah, she leaves her water pot there and she runs back and she tells people, you know, he told me everything I've ever done, you know, and she goes back and she tells, but all the people come back and they come see Jesus. I just think it's so cool. I feel like I'm rambling too much, but I love the story.
No, I mean, once again, it's just a fascinating story on such a deep level. I think lots of times we don't understand scarcity of water in our day and age that we live in, at least in our American culture. So sometimes I think it really is hard to wrap our brains around this to some degree, right? And the need for water, you know, and that's why I think she is so adamant, like, oh man, I don't have to ever come back and do this like ever again. Like, absolutely, like, you know, sign me up. And I was trying to think of something that was just kind of like, you know, maybe common for us, you know, like, I'm like, man, what do we do a lot that we don't really want to do? Like, and I was like, but it kind of keeps us going. It's like, maybe it's like putting gas in your car, right? Like, imagine that you would never, ever have to like put gas in your car again, that your car would just go and go and go, and it would get you where you need to, and you would never have to worry about being late again, you know, like, or you would hop in your car and you'd see that your wife didn't fill it up. It was on E, or, you know, well, husbands are supposed to fill it up anyways, right? Like, you know, or all of those situations. And then you got to go and you got to go do this, and then you got to pay for the money. And then, you know, sometimes you may not have money. And so you go to the gas station and you put $2 or $3 or $5 or $10, whatever you have, which we know is not a lot of gas nowadays. Like, and so, like, you know, just trying to kind of portray it into that reality. Like, imagine if you had a vehicle that could get you anywhere you needed to go and you never ever had to pay money to fill it up or spend the time or find the places to be able to go. And like, I think that, like I said, I don't think it's a great analogy, honestly, but I think anything that we can do to try to bring it forward, like try to think about some of those things in your life, like that are very, very tough and difficult. And like you said, you do it daily. We don't get gas daily. We don't have to do that. But man, imagine if every day, like to start your day, if you wanted to go somewhere, you had to go and take your container or take your car and you had to fill up and you had to wait because maybe there was somebody else there who was using the only, well, or the only gas that was there. Like this was an everyday process. And like, I think for us, if we can try to begin to think about it culturally within our terms, I think it helps maybe expand our view a little bit. And like I said, gas may be a terrible analogy or a terrible, whatever, but man, think about in your life. What are some things that, man, if you didn't have to do that, on the daily basis, or if this was taken care of, well, then I think, water becomes much more special. That feeling becomes a whole lot more special and a lot more, it becomes more real, I think, in our lives, because this is where they were at. And it's not like they just had to walk, out their house to the well. No, like they had to walk to the well. Yeah. And it probably wasn't just one community that was using this well. There were probably several communities, people coming from all different communities to use it. And it would have been a place of, I think, where, there was a lot of commonality, where you would meet people, where you would have interactions, where sometimes even events.
Marriage proposals.
Yeah, events and stuff potentially would have happened at the well. And so she was at such a place that she didn't want to be a part of any of that. Like, she didn't want to be a part of that.
Avoid people.
She was trying to avoid people on such a deep, deep, deep level. And when water is so important, and then all of a sudden here is Jesus who is offering this living water, this water that never runs dry, this water where you'll never thirst again. Like, man, I can just picture the reality of her, her countenance changing in that moment. And then Jesus once again beginning to explain this reality of what relationship with him is, right? What accepting him really is it does bring us to this place. And yeah, we often think about spiritual needs, but I think there are so many times that we have emotional and mental and needs, and sometimes even physical needs. But like, I think it's the reality is life with Jesus. It does bring this life to those things, if we will allow it to be able to do that, because it does heal, it does nourish, it does sustain, it does give us what we need. Satisfy. Right. And then when we are more sustained and satisfied within our emotional, within our mental, then it becomes so much more easier to be a person of worship who lives out that worship day in and day out. And I think that is what Jesus is really beginning to drive towards, is like, listen, there is something that is going to sustain you. It is deeper than just physical need. Physical need is very, very important, but it is so much more deeper than physical need, that when you receive this, worship will be so much better. And it's not that you realize you have to go to a physical place. It's not that it's going to be for the Jews only, that you got to go to the temple. But man, worship, when you are sustained by me, then worship will freely flow from your life. And we've had the conversation. Yes, we love worship and singing songs, but worship is a change of the heart, and worship is a daily thing that we live out on a daily basis. Yes, we sing songs, we worship God, we give praise to God, but worship becomes something so much more. That worship becomes that act of living out the realities of what has truly begun to sustain us. And so this is such a beautiful, beautiful passage. Man, continue to dive deep into it, because it just blows my mind, once again, on such a crazy basis, that yes, this sustaining water was for Nicodemus, but it's not just for Nicodemus, it's for the Samaritan woman as well. Yeah. And then his disciples come back and they don't get it. They don't understand.
Yeah, the disciples, and they're like, come on, Jesus, let's eat. And it looks like he had sent them to the store so that they wouldn't be in his way, so he could have this conversation. Yep. So they get back and they're trying to get him to eat, and he's too excited. He's like, I'm fulfilled because of this. But I love it though that she goes and she tells everybody in her community, and they come back and they see for themselves how they know, not because of her testimony, but they know now because they've seen him with their own eyes. Then they invite him into their home, and he stays for I don't know, it doesn't tell you which home, but he stays in their community for 2 more days. And that means the disciples were with him. And can you imagine the conversations that these 2 groups of people that despise each other, supposedly, before Jesus, without Jesus, they despise each other. And here they are having conversations. And again, Jesus has just demolished this wall that separated them, this racial indifference and this, or difference in the cultural differences. And all of that was just gone because Jesus is the one that unifies. And I think about the scripture that talks about, I can't remember where it is, but it's like his peace, the blood of Jesus breaks down every dividing wall. And here it is. There's no division because he is the common denominator in this. And so that teaches me a lot to love people that are different from me and to let Jesus be that common bond between us. But I could just go on and on. There's so much in this story, but
I just love this last part on such a deep level. It's just, so many times we have encounters with God, and we know that the call is for us to take the gospel to the world around us. And we go to God and we say, like, I can't do it because I don't know what to say. I'm worried I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm worried I'm going to do this. I'm worried. And I just love this because one of the first persons to actually go, other than the disciples, to truly go in John, sorry, I know I'm putting a lot of things, caveats in there, but to actually go and tell the good news of the gospel is this outcast woman that Jesus shouldn't have even been talking to, that was an enemy of the Jews. And she doesn't tell Jesus, oh man, thank you so much for this living water. Here, let me get you your water. I'm going to go back and I'm just going to live life the way that I've always lived life. Like, no, like she has the humility to be able to go back. And she doesn't have theological training. Like, she doesn't have like all of the answers. She probably doesn't know all of the right words to say. She's obviously able to carry on a conversation with Jesus, theological conversation with Jesus, but she doesn't have it all figured out or it all together. But no, she's willing to go back in her humility, and she's willing to tell her story. She's willing to tell her story. That's all she does. That's all she does, right? She goes and she says, he's told me everything I ever did. Hey, let me tell you what I did, and let me tell you what he told me about me, because they would have known her story too. And so like she was not willing, or she was willing to tell her story, but she didn't allow her story to define her and to bring her to a place to say, you know what, I can't share this. I can't be a part of this. No, she had humility, and she went back to the people, and she was willing to share her story and share the realities of her story and what God had done and Jesus had done in her life. And when she does that, that is essentially where the difference is made. And so many times we get hung up on who we are and us having the right words to say and us making sure that we, have it all together. And she's like, listen,
we have baggage.
Exactly. Like, and she doesn't have it together, she doesn't have it together, but she's willing to go and she's willing to tell her story and tell about Jesus and who Jesus is and what Jesus has done for her. And that makes all the difference in the world for this community that she is in, because she is willing to have that humility and willing to share her story. What a message that we need to hear today, that if you think you don't have it all together, well, get in line, because I don't have it all together. And, if you think that you don't know all the right words to say, well, get in line, because I don't have all the right words to say. But each of us have a story, and each of us have an intersection where our lives have intersected with the one true God, and we can tell our story. And I'm here to tell you, when you are faithful with your story and you give your story back to God so that God can then have your story, when you are faithful with that, then God will be faithful in making sure that he does the rest. It's not up to you, and it's not on you to make people come to know and intersect their life with Jesus. But if you are willing and you will just be faithful to the story that God has given to you and what God has done in your life. I am here to tell you, you will make a difference in the world around you. But it takes humility, it takes emptying of the self, and it takes turning our story over to God and allowing Him to use the story and His interaction with our life, and the world will be different.
And it starts with honesty.
That's good.
You know, that was the first thing she did. She came clean. You
Yep.
know, like, yeah, you're right. Wow. I wish I could see Seth. He is like so passionate. His hands are moving and he's just really going at it over there. But yeah, and it's late. It's like 8:30 my time and I'm just too good to stay away. But it's such a great story, and again, I do encourage you to go read it for yourself. Read it in a different translation and just let the Lord speak to you. And I hope you've been challenged to allow God to use your story so you can tell others about Him, because like Seth said, when you made that intersection with Him, when you had an encounter with Him, you can't keep it to yourself.
Yep.
And you don't have to have the right words. So anyway, thank you for listening to our take on this story without reading all of the verses, but
Yes.
we do encourage you to get in the Word and to read it. But we would love to hear from you this week. If you have any questions or comments or prayer requests or anything, we do have an email address. It is growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com, and we also have social media. We have a Facebook page, and it is
Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast.
yes. So look us up on Facebook and send us a message, and we'd love to connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we do have, I think, a prayer request that we would potentially like to mention. We're not going to mention necessarily names, but we do have someone who does listen pretty regularly. They had a big loss in their life over these last couple of days, and unexpectedly lost a son in his sleep. And the son has two daughters, I believe. And we just want this person to know we love you. We're praying for you. If there's anything we can do for you, man, please don't hesitate to reach out. And we implore you, encourage you. Like I said, names necessarily doesn't matter. God knows the need. And so we just ask that you would lift this person up in prayer as they are struggling with what does life look like now. There's times that we just go through things and we'll never have an answer of why, where there's no way of understanding. But you know, sometimes I think God puts us in places and things happen, and we're not meant to understand, and that's hard, but it's okay. And thankfully we know that we have a God that journeys with us even in the midst of the struggle, the pain, and the hurt. Doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but it does mean that sometimes life is hard. But we love you. We're praying for you. Like I said, if there's anything we can do, man, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we're praying for you. Thanks once again for listening. Know that we love you all, and if there's anything we can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out. Grace and peace. God bless. Bye-bye.